The message lit up my phone just as I finished wrapping a gift for a loyal customer. I'm leaving you and moving to Fort Lauderdale with Megan. Don't bother calling. I've already drained the joint account. Enjoy your little boutique. Todd. My hands didn't tremble. My smile didn't falter. I handed the package to Mrs. Gallagher and thanked her for supporting my store, just as I had for 12 steady years. But something deep behind my ribcage cracked, like a porcelain plate suddenly hairlined under pressure. My name is Evelyn Ross. I'm 42, a boutique owner in Asheville, North Carolina, and I had just received the coldest goodbye in marital history, from the man I'd once believed would grow old with me. But while Todd probably pictured me collapsing in tears, maybe breaking down behind the cash register, I simply turned the sign to closed, locked up, and exhaled into the silence. Because I had seen this coming. The late nights that didn't match his pay stubs. The gym obsession after years of couch potato apathy. The unfamiliar perfume on his collar. 3 months ago, I found a receipt for an expensive steakhouse. On a night, he said he was working late. That night, I opened a private bank account in my name only. 1 week later, when he suggested combining our finances to simplify things, I smiled and agreed, transferring every cent of my savings out of reach. I left just enough in the joint account to keep him from getting suspicious. So when he boasted in his text that he'd emptied everything, he was unknowingly bragging about robbing a pot I'd already gutted. The emotional peak came not from the betrayal itself, but from the arrogance of it. Megan, the 22-year-old barista from his office. I'd seen her giggle at his stories like a schoolgirl at the Christmas party, unaware she was nodding along with a man pushing 50 and spiraling into a midlife delusion. Todd didn't just cheat, he traded down and thought I'd be crushed by it. But I had already consulted a lawyer 2 months prior. I had printed records, screenshots, credit card statements, documented proof of everything from shady hotel stays to suspicious wire transfers. What Todd thought was a clever escape was in truth a trap he'd walked into barefoot. That evening, I sat alone in the home I had inherited from my grandmother, drinking a glass of wine I'd been saving for a special occasion. This qualified. As he packed to leave for Florida, I was preparing to file the papers that would unravel every fantasy he'd built on deception. At 42, I realized something many women don't see until too late. Some men mistake silence for weakness. But quiet doesn't mean unprepared. How many of us have ignored warning signs because we feared rocking the boat? And when the betrayal finally comes, are we ready to rise? Not in revenge, but in quiet, deliberate power. Claire sat in the silence of her living room, a quiet fortress in a world that had just tried to crush her. The velvet evening wrapped around the house as she reviewed each document one last time. Receipts, bank transfers, screenshots of every condescending message Mark had sent since his grand Miami reveal. His arrogance had made her work easier. 3 months ago, she discovered a dinner receipt for 2 at a restaurant Mark had never taken her to. That same night, she opened a private account in her name only. A week later, when Mark suggested they combine finances, for simplicity, she'd smiled sweetly and agreed, knowing full well she'd already moved her savings. He thought he was clever, but Claire had lived 12 years with a man who spoke of loyalty while hiding late-night texts. She knew his patterns better than he knew himself. As the clock neared midnight, her phone buzzed again. Don't bother begging. Melissa and I leave tomorrow. I'll send for my things later. Claire didn't reply. Instead, she filed away another piece of his foolishness, his digital fingerprints stacking up neatly in her case folder. Melissa, the receptionist from his office, the one who laughed too loud at his jokes, was about to join him in a disaster they both thought was a fantasy. But tonight wasn't about them. Tonight was for Claire to prepare. She called her lawyer, the same woman she'd consulted 2 months ago when she'd found hotel charges on their joint credit card. It's time, Claire said, her voice steady. Papers are ready, the lawyer confirmed. Want him served in Miami? No rush, Claire replied. Let him feel like he's won, for a moment. The next morning, Claire filed fraud claims with their credit card company. The representative didn't hide her satisfaction as she canceled the charges for 2 first-class tickets to Miami and a luxury hotel. Mark and Melissa would arrive at the airport to find their escape plan erased. Claire spent the rest of the day at her boutique. Friday was her busiest day, and a new shipment had just come in. As she unpacked Italian handbags, she thought about the irony. Her husband had dismissed her business as a little shop, but it now brought in more revenue than his corporate job ever had. He had no idea she'd built it as a legal entity, separate and protected, just in case. By noon, the manipulation escalated. Mark's mother called, parroting his narrative. Mark says you're being vindictive, that you've frozen the accounts and ruined his travel plans. Claire calmly placed her on speaker. Did he also tell you he emptied our joint account and used our credit card to book a trip with his girlfriend? Silence. Well, he said you'd been cold, distant. I have his texts, Claire said. Would you like me to read them? No, I suppose he did mention taking the money, she mumbled. Claire ended the call with grace. Thank you for checking in, Barbara, but I've been advised to limit contact during the proceedings. Goodbye. By nightfall, word had spread. Mark and Melissa were stranded at a budget motel, their dreams of luxury crushed by maxed-out personal cards. His sister Amanda had started gossiping through mutual friends, and even Melissa's Instagram was offering evidence, complete with selfies captioned, "Starting our forever." But behind the smug posts was a reality Claire had predicted. Mark had burned every bridge, and Claire was the only one who had prepared for the fire. 6 months after the divorce, the boutique Claire once called her little shop was now a 2-location brand, with a growing national presence thanks to its new online store. Orders came in faster than they could restock shelves, and customers from all over the country were beginning to recognize the Harrison label, not for scandal, but for style and strength. What Mark had dismissed as a hobby had become a flourishing business empire. Ironically, it was the gossip about Mark's downfall that gave Claire's boutique its first viral boost. Women, older, younger, professionals, and retirees, began visiting not just for handbags or accessories, but to show support. Your story gave me the push I needed, one woman whispered while purchasing a cashmere scarf. Another confided, my ex tried to take my business too. Claire listened, nodded, and wrapped their items with the same silver paper she'd once handed to Mrs. Peterson the day her marriage crumbled. Meanwhile, Mark was still grasping at whatever remained of the life he thought he'd orchestrated. Word through mutual friends revealed that his new adventure with Melissa had quickly soured. The luxury apartment he'd promised her had never materialized. Instead, they were now squeezed into her small studio, the excitement of forbidden romance dulled by cramped space and unpaid bills. His credit cards had long since been maxed out. The airline and hotel charges Claire had reported months ago had left lasting marks on his financial record. Claire's lawyer kept her informed of Mark's legal attempts to claw back some form of control. He filed multiple petitions trying to dispute the divorce settlement, each one weaker than the last. He even claimed your separation of assets was too strategic to be fair, her lawyer laughed. One judge asked if being organized now counted as vindictive. Mark's delusions didn't stop there. He told anyone who'd listen that the boutique had been his idea, that he had invested emotionally in its success. He claimed he'd encouraged Claire to dream bigger, which, according to him, entitled him to half the profits. Unfortunately for him, Claire's records were pristine. Every invoice, loan document, and expense was filed. Every investment traced to her personal funds, her grandmother's inheritance, or reinvested profits. The judge had already ruled it was a separate asset. Mark's appeals were just noise. Even his own family began to distance themselves. Amanda, his sister, showed up at Claire's boutique unannounced one afternoon. She browsed quietly, then finally approached the counter. We didn't support you when we should have, she said softly, running her fingers along a row of silk scarves. He lied to us, painted himself as the victim, but after we read those texts, we were ashamed we ever took his side. Claire didn't gloat. She simply nodded, thanked Amanda for visiting, and returned to the day's orders. It wasn't revenge she wanted. It was peace. Still, some things were impossible to ignore. Mark's mother called occasionally, usually when Mark did something particularly reckless. He tried online gambling, she sighed once, said he could fix everything in one weekend. Another time, he got involved in some scheme, promised guaranteed returns, lost even more. Claire listened politely but distantly. She no longer felt responsible for cleaning up the messes Mark created. The only trace of him that remained in her life was framed on her office wall. The text message that started it all. "Have fun with your little shop," it read, followed by the now infamous, "Ha ha!" Below the message hung Claire's most recent award, Entrepreneur of the Year, from a regional business journal. 1 year after the divorce was finalized, Claire hosted the grand opening of her third boutique. Press arrived. So did influencers and longtime clients. The story they told wasn't one of betrayal, it was of reinvention. And Claire stood tall in the center of it, surrounded by employees who respected her and customers who trusted her. Unexpectedly, Melissa walked through the boutique's doors that afternoon. She looked thinner, more tired than Claire remembered, but she held herself with the tentative confidence of someone trying to make amends. "I owe you an apology," she said, avoiding direct eye contact. "I believed him. I thought he was the one who'd been hurt. Then I saw it firsthand, how he turned on me too." Claire said nothing, letting her speak. "He tried to move in when the accounts got frozen," Melissa continued. "Said it was temporary, but after 2 weeks of him complaining about the closet and pushing me to take out a loan for a bigger place, I realized something. He doesn't want a partner. He wants a lifeline." Claire gave a short nod. "That's not love. That's dependency." Melissa offered a small, rueful smile. "I'm dating someone my own age now. We don't have much. Student loans, tiny apartment. But at least it's real." As she left, Claire turned to her assistant manager. "Was that the girlfriend?" she asked. "No," Claire said with a small smile. "That was just another woman who learned the truth." The boutique had outgrown its origin. It was no longer just a business, it was a symbol of freedom, of resilience, of what a woman could build when she stopped waiting for someone to save her, and did it herself. By the time the final divorce hearing arrived, Rachel Carrington no longer recognized the man sitting across from her in the courtroom. Once, Ethan had been her husband of 12 years, her partner in late-night business planning and morning coffee runs. Now he was a shadow of that man, nervous, disheveled, and flanked by an overworked attorney who clearly hadn't anticipated just how airtight Rachel's case would be. The courtroom itself was modest. Stained oak benches, pale blue walls, and the quiet hum of air conditioning that couldn't quite calm Ethan's jittery leg. His new girlfriend, Chloe, sat at the back of the room in a dress too tight for the occasion, her presence a defiant reminder of the betrayal that had sparked all this. Rachel, however, sat with calm composure. At 42, she had built a thriving home decor company that now spanned 2 storefronts and a booming online division. The business Ethan had once scoffed at as her little side project now grossed more annually than his salary ever had. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s, reviewed the mountain of documentation. Account ledgers, business registrations, tax records, property deeds, all showing clear separation between marital assets and Rachel's enterprise. "Mr. Carrington," the judge began, lifting a sheaf of papers, "you admit to withdrawing funds from your joint account days before filing for divorce." Ethan shifted. "I thought we agreed." "You transferred those funds into a personal offshore account and used them to finance a trip with your girlfriend," the judge interrupted. "You also attempted to claim half of your wife's business, despite ample evidence proving it was established with her personal funds prior to the marriage." Rachel's attorney, a composed man named Vincent Klein, leaned forward. Your Honor, we also have screenshots of texts from Mr. Carrington where he refers to Rachel's company as her thing and states explicitly that he had no involvement. Rachel watched Ethan as that reality sank in. His plan had been simple: sabotage her emotionally, grab the money, and walk away victorious. What he hadn't counted on was her foresight, her meticulous record-keeping, or her refusal to collapse under pressure. The court finds, the judge continued, that the business in question is a separate asset and not subject to division. Furthermore, due to financial misconduct, all shared accounts are to remain frozen until funds are restored. Chloe glanced at Ethan, visibly annoyed. She hadn't expected this either. She had signed on for beachfront brunches, not court-ordered restitution. After the gavel struck, Rachel stood, her posture regal. Ethan caught up to her in the hallway, desperation in his voice. "Rach, please. We were married for over a decade. Doesn't that mean something?" "It did," she replied without blinking. "Until you used those years as leverage to take what wasn't yours." He grabbed at straws. "You don't have to do this. We can fix it. I made a mistake." Rachel shook her head slowly. "You didn't make a mistake, Ethan. You made a series of decisions, calculated, deliberate ones. This is just the consequence." She walked past him, her heels clicking on the tile, echoing the sound of finality. In the weeks that followed, Rachel's business flourished, sales surged. Her story became one of local legend, and women came into her store not just for decor advice, but for strength. Her quiet success spoke louder than any courtroom argument. Meanwhile, Ethan moved in with Chloe, into a one-bedroom apartment she shared with a roommate. The glamour faded quickly. The Instagram stories stopped. According to a mutual friend, Chloe eventually left him, calling him an anchor with excuses. One afternoon, Rachel received a package at her store. Inside was an apology letter from Ethan, handwritten, full of regret, sealed with a photo from their honeymoon. She read it once and set it aside. She didn't need an apology. What she had needed, years ago, was a partner. What she needed now was peace, and she had that in abundance. She looked out over her shop floor, where her newest employee, a recently divorced woman in her 50s, helped a customer pick out curtains for a fresh start. A symbolic circle had closed. Her boutique wasn't just a business anymore. It had become a haven. 6 months after finalizing the divorce, Rachel Carrington stood under the soft glow of pendant lights in her third boutique location. The space smelled of new wood, fresh paint, and opportunity. To customers, it was just another charming shop on Main Street. But to Rachel, it was a symbol of everything she'd rebuilt from the ashes of betrayal. Outside the boutique window, a familiar face hesitated before entering. Melissa, Ethan's ex-girlfriend. Rachel didn't flinch. She adjusted a display of autumn scarves near the entrance, her movements fluid and assured. Melissa approached, clutching her designer tote like a shield. "I know I'm probably the last person you want to see," she said, her voice quieter than Rachel remembered. Rachel nodded. "Probably. But you're here." "I owe you an apology," Melissa began. "When Ethan and I first got together, I believed everything he told me, that you were cold, controlling, obsessed with your business. I thought I was rescuing him." Rachel raised an eyebrow, amused by the irony. "And now," Melissa's gaze dropped, "now I know I was a placeholder. He said the same things about me once I started questioning his spending. He moved into my place like it was a hotel, ran through my savings, and started blaming me for why his life wasn't working out." Rachel motioned toward the counter. "Sit. You look like you need more than just an apology." Melissa sat down slowly. "He said he'd change, said this time would be different. But it was the same script, just a new co-star." Rachel poured her a glass of cucumber water. "It always is." They sat in silence for a moment, two women once pitted against each other, now quietly united by survival. Melissa spoke again, this time with the rawness of someone who had finally accepted reality. I heard you're expanding again. 5 locations now? Almost 6, Rachel replied, a flicker of pride in her eyes. I signed the lease last week. Melissa smiled sadly. He used to mock your shop, you know. Said it was cute, but not a real business. Rachel looked around at the polished floor, the curated shelves, the line of customers waiting at the register. I suppose cute pays the bills now. Melissa stood, setting her glass down. Thank you for listening, and for not turning me away. Rachel placed a hand on her shoulder. We all learn, Melissa. Some of us just have to learn the hard way. As Melissa left, Rachel returned to her office, where a framed copy of Ethan's final text still hung above her desk. Have fun with your little shop. Below it, her newest award, Top Women-Owned Business in the State. Later that evening, her assistant manager brought over a sales report. We've doubled our online orders this month, she said excitedly, and our new newsletter subscribers just hit 50,000. Rachel scanned the numbers with quiet satisfaction. She no longer needed validation, but it still felt good to see tangible proof of her growth, especially knowing how close she'd come to losing everything, not just financially, but emotionally. Suddenly, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Ethan's mother. Susan Carrington. Heard about your new store. Congratulations, Rachel. I'm proud of you, even if my son never deserved you. Rachel stared at the message for a moment, then placed her phone face down on the desk. Some bridges didn't need to be rebuilt. The next week, she hosted a workshop for young women entrepreneurs. As she spoke about building a business from scratch and protecting one's financial independence, she noticed a woman in the back of the room quietly crying. Afterward, the woman approached. My ex tried to take everything, she said, voice trembling. But I saw your story in the paper. You inspired me to fight back. Rachel handed her a business card. Start here. We all deserve to stand on our own. That night, Rachel closed her store alone, locking up beneath the soft glow of her sign that now bore her full name, Carrington and Company. Boutique, curated by Rachel Carrington. She walked home under the Tennessee stars, her heels clicking with confidence. Ethan had once tried to define her by what he thought she lacked, but Rachel had written a new story, not about loss, but about power, perseverance, and grace. 2 years had passed since Ethan Carrington's cruel text message ended Rachel's marriage in the most cowardly way possible. In that time, she had transformed her pain into purpose, building a thriving boutique empire across 5 cities. Now, as she stood backstage at the Women in Business Conference in Charlotte, North Carolina, she wasn't just a speaker, she was the keynote. The topic, protecting what you build. A subject she knew all too well. Rachel took the stage in a navy blue suit, heels clicking with the quiet command of a woman who'd been underestimated one time too many. Her image appeared on the screen behind her. Founder and CEO of Carrington and Company, named one of America's most influential female entrepreneurs. I'm not here to talk about divorce, she began, her voice steady. I'm here to talk about the day I stopped apologizing for being prepared. Laughter rippled through the audience. She had them. Preparation, she continued, isn't about paranoia. It's about self-respect. The crowd leaned in. Older women in the front row nodded knowingly. Many had weathered similar storms. She shared her story. Not the scandal, but the strategy. How she'd built her boutique separately from her marriage. How she'd kept clean records, held sole ownership, and maintained legal boundaries that protected her from financial devastation. You don't have to scream to be powerful, she told them. Sometimes the loudest revenge is a silent success. As she exited the stage to applause, a younger woman approached her, eyes wide with admiration. My fiancé wants us to merge accounts and open a business together, she said. But I've been hesitant. Am I being difficult? Rachel handed her a card. You're being smart. Love doesn't mean giving away your leverage. That evening, Rachel returned to her flagship store in Savannah. It was her favorite location, tucked into a cobblestone street with antique lanterns and ivy-covered windows. Inside, her team had decorated for the boutique's 5-year anniversary. Champagne glasses sparkled on every display table, and customers mingled, trying on scarves and laughing. Among them, she spotted someone unexpected: Ethan's mother. Susan Carrington looked different. Older, yes, but softer somehow. She wore one of Rachel's blouses and carried herself with the same quiet grace Rachel once tried so hard to maintain during her marriage. "I wasn't sure if I should come," Susan admitted, approaching her, "but I wanted to see what you built, and to say thank you." Rachel blinked. "Thank you?" "For showing me the truth," Susan said, voice cracking. "Ethan told us lies for years, that you were cold, controlling, obsessed with your business. But I see now, he feared your strength." Rachel looked at the room around them, her staff, her loyal customers, the framed awards on the wall. "He should have," she said softly. Susan smiled. "He's living in a rental over a garage now, still blaming everyone but himself. But I told him this time, I'm done defending his mistakes." Rachel gave a polite nod. "That's more than he ever gave me." Later that night, after the last guest had gone, Rachel walked through her store, switching off the lights one by one. She paused at the framed screenshot that still hung behind her desk. Ethan's final message: "Have fun with your little shop. At least it'll keep you busy in your old age." Below it, she'd mounted her most recent award: National Women's Business Vanguard, Lifetime Achievement Recognition. She didn't need revenge anymore. That ship had sailed. But symbols mattered. The next morning, she met with a group of college interns, young women studying business and marketing. She handed each of them a leather-bound notebook stamped with Carrington and Company's gold foil crest. "Your job isn't just to create," she told them. "It's to protect. To outthink the people who assume you'll stay small." They looked at her with the kind of reverence she once reserved for the women who'd paved her path. One intern asked, "How do you deal with the fear of losing everything?" Rachel paused, then smiled. "You prepare like it could happen, but you live like it never will." As they left for the day, Rachel sat alone at her desk, watching the sun warm the front windows. A customer walked by, paused, and took a picture of the boutique's elegant display. She thought of all the women who had been told their dreams were hobbies, and then she whispered to herself, not out of pride, but clarity: "This was never a little shop. This was my beginning." One of the most powerful lessons from Rachel's story is this: being prepared is not a sign of distrust. It's a reflection of self-respect and wisdom. At any stage in life, especially for older adults who have given so much to their families or spouses, protecting one's personal assets and dignity is not only reasonable, it's essential. Rachel didn't respond with rage or public drama. She responded with quiet strategy, clear documentation, and an unwavering trust in herself. In real life, this lesson goes beyond age or circumstance. It's a reminder that everyone, regardless of how old they are, has the right to rebuild after betrayal. Whether you're 60 or 75, setting boundaries, standing tall, and choosing to live with meaning and independence is always within reach. Because success has no expiration date, and self-respect is the foundation of every comeback.